Shopping and dining over Thanksgiving and maybe watching some football games. Big government Republicans and Democrats were busy shredding the last vestiges of the Constitution. Senators John McCain and Carl Levin want to enact a law that would declare the entire United States of America a battlefield for the military. They're talking about inserting the Army into domestic law enforcement. Senator Lindsey Graham, who supports this bill, says, quote, "The homeland is part of the battlefield, and people can be held without trial, whether an American citizen or not." I guess he hasn't read the Constitution recently. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Macgregor joins us now. Colonel Macgregor, as always, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks, Judge.
I must tell you, I was utterly appalled when I saw this legislation proposed. We didn't learn about it until last night because the committee hearings on it were done in secret, even though the Constitution requires the Congress to do these things in public. And there were no actual hearings, just a bunch of members of the Senate who got together and wrote this thing. And it basically says the president can arrest whoever he wants anywhere in the United States of America and keep them without charging them with a crime, without letting them see a lawyer, without bringing them to a judge for as long as he wants. How is that consistent with the Constitution?
Well, Judge, you're the legal expert, but whenever you suspend due process, which in effect suspends the rule of law, you walk down a very dangerous path and you give authority to your government that it can then wield essentially without restraint. What worries me is that we'll end up creating categories of people who are then subject to arbitrary arrest. And that's dangerous because we don't know how those categories will be defined or interpreted in the future. All in all, it's a disaster, and it's something that should be defeated.
You have spent a career in the military. You're also an expert in political science, particularly with respect to its relationship to the military. Do you see a role for the military in domestic law enforcement? Do you see American troops, young men and women, arresting other Americans because the president doesn't like what they've said?
I certainly hope not. And I can tell you that having served in the regular armed forces, people in the regular Army and Marine Corps have no interest in participating in those kinds of events. I'm sure there are some narrow purposes to which the military could be put to good use. I mean, clearly, if you're dealing with paramilitary drug lords and mafias on your soil, you may need the assistance of the military. But other than that, I can't conceive of any sort of circumstances that would justify this legislation.
All right, switching gears a little bit. Well, we were just talking to Senator Ron Johnson about what happens now that the super committee failed and supposedly these sequestrations kick in. Of course, they don't kick in until 2013. But if they do kick in, can the military tolerate these sequestrations? Stated differently, aren't we already spending far more than we need to defend the nation and to defend our freedom on the military?
Well, the answer to your second question, of course, is yes. And the way to go about this, and we have no way of knowing what people on the Hill will do. And remember, the people on the Hill, contrary to popular belief, are not really terribly well informed about military affairs. So they're going to be bombarded by a mix of lobbyists and generals and admirals who are going to try and pursue their agendas. But the way to do it is to cut from the outside in. That is to begin reducing and scaling back our overseas presence, which is a legacy of the Cold War, and then the expansion of that overseas presence that we went through in the 90s under Clinton and has really run out of control since 2001. So bringing those forces back, stopping the expenditures overseas, will save us at least $1 trillion in the first 3 or 4 years if it's done intelligently. Then we need to look at reform and reorganization. You're dealing with a National Security Act that was passed in 1947, Judge. This is an anachronistic command and control structure left over from World War II. We desperately need reform and reorganization. One way to go about that is to starve this beast of money and compel people to re-examine all of their assumptions, because the future is not going to look like the past.
Got it. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.